It's B Cube Sunday morning. And as always, on the second Sunday of the month, we have the one and only Tom Whitmore, the guy that's got every book you ever didn't think was still in print down in his basement somewhere, um, and cats that will continuously remind him that they need to go outside. And Kevin, you brought us some guests this morning to talk about Robert's Rules of Order. And I will tell you, with that, I'm going to call the question and then let you have it. So you have a good day on this one, okay?
Thank you, Bob. And let's, yes, now we switch to the three vertical things. We all have to readjust our positions. It always
Okay.
to get these things right.
Oh, good. Now I can lean back.
Yeah. We're going to talk about a lot of things that relate to Robert's Rules of Order rather than giving you a lecture on how to use them. We're going to talk about why they exist, how are they used in a meeting, why do you want them, why does it matter? And my two guests today are Kevin Standley, who co-chaired Con Jose with me and who has chaired more WorldCon business meetings than I think anybody else.
I'd have to go back through the records, but I know I've chaired it in more countries, and I believe it's 6, but it might be 7, where I have been in the chair of the meeting. But there are people who have more experience than me in the past before my time, basically.
And he's taking some time off this year and just assisting his wife with the videoing of the business meeting at the WorldCon so that you can actually see what goes on in a WorldCon business meeting if you want to. Part of why we're doing this is because we want to give ShyCon a little bit of a boost. And Linda, who is the other portion of this, is going to be talking about a little bit about what's involved with running the WSFS division and the finance division for WorldCon. Linda, a little bit more?
Oh, well, I can't really talk too much about the finance division. I'm learning as I go. But Alexia has been really kind about teaching me how to use QuickBooks and Stripe and keeping it all together so we have our registration and we pay our bills and we know what's going on. The WSFS division consists of 3 things. It consists of the Hugo Awards, it consists of site selection, and it consists of the business meeting. And the business meeting is where we run using Robert's Rules of Order. And I am the secretary of the business meeting this year, as well as the deputy division head for the finance division for ShyCon.
And I don't want to undersell Linda will, but I consider her job the hardest one in the entire business meeting. Chairing the meeting is easy. Keeping the minutes of the meeting and organizing the official records of the society is hard. I've been secretary in the past, but Linda has been the most common secretary for the past decade plus. Looking back through the history of the World Science Fiction Society meetings at WorldCon, there seem to be runs of time when there have been individuals who have been dominant during their period of time and been the go-to person to keep the records. And Linda has been that person, and I have relied heavily upon her working for me, and occasionally me working for her. including at the time I had to step in for you in 2014 when you were called away on someone else's medical emergency. And it's a good thing I'd done the job before, because I would not have known what to do.
That was an interesting experience.
Yeah. So what I meant to say there is that although we have for the last, and I've lost track now how many years we've been doing it, back to around 2009 or thereabouts.
2008, 2009, yeah.
We have been the point where we started recording the business meeting consistently and getting it out to the public, that started about then. The fact that you can go and watch the entire multiple hours of it is important, okay? But the written record, the business meeting minutes, are even more important. And for that matter, they're probably a little easier to follow than having to look through. So you could look through 40 pages of notes faster than you can watch 9 hours of video. Let's put it that way.
It's also the legal record for the society.
Yeah, the analogy I've used is that, okay, yeah, you can watch Congress on C-SPAN, but the congressional record is the official,
Yeah,
is what actually happened.
Mhm.
And that's,
exactly.
and they're both important in their ways. So
Yeah. So we're talking to some extent today about why do we have some formal way to make sure that people get a chance to speak. And Kevin is very much a historian of Robert's Rules. Um, he's not the best person in the world for it, but he's probably in the top 20. Um,
at
and,
least in our society, at least in the World Science Fiction Society and the related fields. But yeah.
and I've been interested in the way meetings run since high school. And I'm still interested. And because of that, I have to know a fair amount about it. But Kevin, what's the historical source of this and why do we do it in the first place?
Well, I was going to start by saying I was actually on my elementary school student council when I was in the 6th grade. And when I was in the 8th grade, I rewrote the student council bylaws. So I've been doing this. The seeds were sown a long time ago. It's always interested me. Okay. Well, the interesting thing about the history of this is that you can get a good deal of the history you want just from the preface to Robert's Rules of Order itself, which is only about 20 pages long. It's the history about it. And Major Henry Robert, later general, he was posted out to San Francisco with the U.S. Army in the 1800s, late 1800s. And San Francisco had a lot of people from a lot of places. And every one of them had their own idea about how you're supposed to organize a meeting and how you're supposed to reach decision. And to some extent, every one of them was right because it was right for where they came from. It was the only thing those people knew. And Major Robert was very interested in voluntary societies. And he found that with so many people that he was pushed into presiding over a meeting, and he discovered that everybody had their own idea of how it was supposed to be run, and nothing got done. And he managed to muddle through it, but he said, I'm never going to do that again. I'm going to get some codification. Not that I'm never going to run a meeting again, but I'm never going to run a meeting where I don't know what the rules are. And so he sat down and he started to codify how things he thought they were working. He thought it'd be, a few pages, 10, 15 or so on. And it started to grow and it got bigger. And he put it together. It's got a small book. I actually have a copy upstairs. I forgot to bring it down. A very small book. And it was so, he thought he had so much trouble getting interest in getting it published that he had to guarantee the print run himself.
How
And
big was the print run?
about 1,000, I think, or maybe 2,000. I think it was like 2,000 copies, and he had to guarantee that the first 1,000 would be given complimentary to libraries and such. And it sold out almost immediately, and they had to go back to print quickly, much to everyone's surprise. And it has, over the last 100+ years, it has gone through each edition. There are either corrections. There was a complete top-to-bottom revision in the 1950s. That's called Robert's Rules of Order Revised. In the 1970s, a second top-to-bottom revision that got even bigger. And what happens is more and more things got added to it as interest happened, to the point where it's now this book, which is Robert's Rules of Order newly revised. It's about 800 pages long, but I want to add, one of the reasons it got that big is that I think around the 11th or 11th edition, they raised the point size of the type slightly to make it a little easier to read. But yeah, there it is. But the key elements are actually fairly simple. I mean, there's a lot of elaboration in it. It is the most comprehensive work on meeting procedure I know of. But there are other rule books. There are very simple ones. But the thing is, when simple ones have a tendency to leave out a lot of things that people just, well, of course, we assume that. And that's fine if you're in a homogeneous society where people have always been doing things that way. But when you get a lot of people coming from different places with different traditions, it gets very confusing. So Roberts attempts to document everything, sometimes in ways that people don't agree with, but there's a method for changing that. But I guess that's the first half of it, the history of it. The second half, and this is what I feel strongly about, is that in a civil society, if we want to be able to have groups come together and debate contentious topics and reach a decision that isn't just, okay, I'm strong, I have a hammer, and I'm going to order you around and you better do it. I don't like strong men or strong, or I don't like a strong person just ordering you around like that. I'd rather work in a way we reach a conclusion. Now, the alternatives are, well, we can't do anything unless everybody agrees. Well, that's also a great way to find gridlock. So you have to compromise. And parliamentary procedure, which it has nothing directly to do with the British Parliament. It comes from the word parler, parlay,
Right.
which is to speak. The principles that we work on basically are trying to balance. What am I trying to say here? Balance rights. There are a lot of different rights when you come together as what is known as a deliberative assembly, a group of people trying to reach a decision. There are the rights of individuals. There are the rights of minorities, by which I mean people who are not, or part of a group, not a majority of the members at the meeting. There's the rights of majorities, and a lot of people don't quite get that. Majorities have rights as well, particularly really strong majorities, like more than 2/3 of the people present. Among other things, a majority of the members have a right to not have their time wasted. And there's the rights of the assembly as a whole. And finally, they're the rights of people who are part of that assemblage who are not present, the absentees. All of these people have different rights. Parliamentary procedures of different books, besides Roberts, there's several others out there. They are all attempting to balance those rights.
I think it comes down to Kevin. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. My last sentence was to restate what I said. It's a case of a civil society needs a way to come to conclusions to which the society as a whole can agree to follow.
And I think for WSFS in particular, because we're limited in the amount of time we have, we only meet once a year, it's a way to ensure that the people who want to speak can speak. The meeting runs in a timely fashion and keeps order. People don't always like it. We limit speeches to 5 minutes for the pro side, 5 minutes for the negative side, and you get to speak within that time limit, and then debate is cut off. And people don't always like that. And yes, debate can be extended, but it's a way to keep the trains running on time. When Congress meets, they can adjourn, they can meet the next day. We don't have that luxury.
And we don't have the Senate rule requiring cloture in order to finish debate if anyone wants to keep speaking. Which is,
well, we have the equivalent, which we use quite a bit, and that's the motion sometimes called for the previous question. That is a really old-fashioned term, and I really don't understand why in the last two editions of Roberts they didn't just give up. That term dates back to the 1700s. Most people end up saying the motion to close debate or to call the question. But all three of those things are actually the same motion. That said, to cut off all debate and all further motions and proceed to a vote on what we were considering. But that requires 2/3 in favor. We use it quite a bit because you get into situations where there's one person who's wanting to use all the debate time and wants to say the same thing over and over again and doesn't realize that they're wasting our time. And essentially, at the moment once it becomes clear to the assembly by that much of a person that we've heard all the arguments we're going to hear, let's end the debate and vote on it. But Linda's right. We do a lot of debate limitation. The default debate times in Roberts are crazy. That is, if we didn't have special rules in WSFS, we would in fact be there from the beginning of the convention to the end and then some, because the debate time, the default is 10 minutes per person per question.
Well, one thing we don't have,
and then another 10 minutes if nobody else wants to speak.
One thing we don't have, thank God, is a filibuster.
And we don't. That's right. There, in the absence, there are a bunch of rules we have established. First, there are the defaults in Roberts, which are there anyway, is that nobody, even in a default situation, nobody would ever be able to speak for more than 2 speeches of 10 minutes. That's the most, okay? Barring permission to speak further, which requires 2/3 again. But our standard rules in WSFS are far more restrictive than that. I've forgotten what the default is. I think it is actually 10 minutes, but I'm not sure. I'd have to look it up. I don't have it in front of me. But the point is that most of the time we aren't even using that. We have a lot of things we're going to discuss that we discuss over a 3 to 4 day period. And there's a lot of people with opinions, but a lot of the discussion will have taken place in other venues before the actual debate. And we aren't, one of the problems with our situation, we aren't a representative assembly. We don't elect, say, a council or a board of directors or a representative body, and then they can argue it for months and months and months. We don't. We are a mass meeting. Every single person at the convention could conceivably turn up and vote. I've had to contemplate such situations. It's never in my history, it's never gotten to more than about 400 people. But there have been times when I wondered, especially in 2015, I was saying, we could get 1,000 people in here, maybe 2,000. And I'd been talking to the convention programming about what we'd already had to move from the room that they wanted us in. We were already on plan B at 400. I was saying, if we go above that, you're going to have to go here.
Yeah. The contentious item that year was what was going on with the Hugos, right?
That's right. And it wasn't just it was the fact that the contention over the Hugo Awards had spawned a large number of conflicting proposals to modify the system.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was the year where Linda was my boss as the WSFS division manager, but she was also on my staff as the secretary. It is a good thing that despite the fact that she and I argue considerably, mostly in private, we do tend to cooperate when it comes to getting the society's business done.
Yes, I remember that with you working on Con Jose, Kevin. We would occasionally argue in private, but we definitely had the same vision of where things should go.
Correct.
We had another interesting meeting. This was a WesterCon, not a WorldCon, where the future of the convention was thrown into doubt, and we had to discuss where we were going to hold the WesterCon 2 years hence. We wound up taking over the main ballroom, and I went through four computer batteries. The meeting concluded just as my final battery was dying.
Yes, we must, remember this, is never come into no matter how short.
On my AC port, I had it with me, and I couldn't find it.
Right. Oh, yeah. Well, I had this. Remember last weekend in Totapa, I thought, oh well, this meeting won't last long. And sure enough, my battery died. So.
Yes, always have it
right.
I remember.
Always carry your battery and your towel.
There was a WesterCon business meeting where Elaine Pells was, in fact, running the meeting, and I was working ops, and I ran into the room or something.
You mean Bruce Pells, I think.
No, I mean Elaine.
Elaine was chairing that meeting? That was before my time. Okay, sorry.
I think she was.
Okay.
But she was on the podium, and I ran in, and she said, "Tom, do you have an extension cord in your pocket?" And I called back for, "No, Elaine, I'm just glad to see you." One of the few times I've actually managed to get off the line just at the right, just in the perfect timing.
Well, yeah. And the funny thing, the meeting that Linda's talking about, what had happened is the normal process for selecting a site had failed. Normally we have an election with a candidate or candidates, and whoever gets a majority through what's called instant runoff voting, which we don't need to get into right now, but it normally produces a winner. But in that particular case, there was one candidate on the ballot, and they had managed to make some mistakes in their campaign, and we found ourselves in a situation where none of the candidates on the ballot received a majority of the votes, and that means the business meeting gets to decide where to hold it. The other
ballot was a hoax bid.
Well, that's right. Okay,
it was myself for a second and get a glass of water, so I'm going to turn my camera off, but I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, while you do that, she knows this story because she was in the middle of it. Uh, the normal a WesterCon business meeting often lasts less than 10 minutes because there hasn't been a lot of business most of the time. And so we just, officially receive the ballot and we're done. Okay. But in this case, there was none of the candidates had received none of the eligible candidates had received a majority, and WesterCon rules say in that case, if you can't get a winner through that, the business meeting decides, and then there's a different set of processes involved. But what we ended up with were a total of 4 different groups, including the group that had originally ran and was on the ballot, a group that had been the popular hoax bid, that is a joke bid that had not filed official papers, and 2 other bids that were rather plausible. One was for planning to bid for the following year, and another group in question. And we ended up discussing that for several hours. And I learned a valuable lesson about that as the chair of that meeting. I also discovered that I've actually watched that video all the way through. And I said, oh, why did I do that? And I've also told other people I know saying, why did you let me do that? Because I know we had a couple of experts who have at least as much knowledge of the rules as I do. And I've told them, I said, why did you let me do that? And no one's ever given me a full answer. But I learned some valuable lessons about what to do the next time that sort of thing happened, which unfortunately it did last year as well because nobody bid. And the same thing has happened this year. Nobody has bid for WesterCon, so I suspect we'll have to take the same tactic of being able to not, I call it painting myself into a parliamentary corner. I almost got us to a place where the meeting was never going to be able to decide something. But I think I could have gotten out of it. There are ways to do that. But if the meeting's sufficiently contentious, you're stuck and you end up adjourning with no result. I digress.
There's 2 important points that are hiding behind several of these discussions. And one is we are a voluntary organization.
Yeah.
An organization that comes together because people want to. And we do privilege the people who happen to be at the business meeting, at the convention, because in many ways, that's who's doing all the work. And I kind of think that the people who do the work should get the chance to make some decisions. But we also, as with any parliamentary group, request that all discussion be addressed to the chair rather than talking to the other individuals, which, as somebody had said in the chat, civility and order is sorely needed these days. Civility and order happens a lot more when you're addressing a supposedly neutral third party than when you're trying to talk with the people yelling at each other.
I have a direct experience of that when I was chairing the WSFS business meeting in Glasgow that would be first Glasgow, which means 1995. And it was a relatively small turnout, and we were not in a very big room. And I don't even remember what the contentious issue was, okay? But by, as it were, almost bad luck, 2 people were sitting only about 3 seats apart from each other in the front row, and one of them was standing to address the question and was starting to say things that the other person badly disagreed with and took it personally and stood up and started turning to that other person and started saying, now, wait a minute, you did. And I went, said, in the middle of that, I went, and they both shut up and looked at me sort of shocked. And I said, the members are reminded that all remarks must be addressed through the chair. Please be seated and allow the member to complete his speech. And they went, and it was like, okay, never mind. And they sat down, and the first person finished, and I said, all right, and member so-and-so, and they got up, and instead of looking over at that person whom they'd been arguing with, they turned to me, Mr. Chairman, and stated it forcefully, but without not using unparliamentary language, which, by the way, you can rubbish your opponent with very polite language. There's an art to it.
I was going
and
to
they
We've all practiced that, yes.
I was
Yeah,
going
that's
to
right.
that when something is contentious, the other alternative is to submit a new item of business to the business meeting. Now, theoretically, I believe it's before the meeting begins is when you must stop submitting new business. Am I correct, Kevin?
Yeah, it's actually 28 days now. We've
Well,
actually
no,
been moving. It used it
but you can submit new business at the business meeting if the chair permits it.
if the chair permits it, or if the members vote to suspend the rules and allow it.
Right.
So the
But
chair might say no, but the members might say yes.
my
So
point
that's another
is,
2/3 vote, right?
Yeah, yes.
But my point is that, if there's something that passes that you really dislike, you have the opportunity. First of all, it takes 2 years just to pass anything at the business meeting. Secondly, if there's something you don't like, you submit a new piece of business the following year.
Well, yeah, and this can get people mightily frustrated. There are, particularly when something is very controversial, like what happened in 2015 with the Hugo Awards. There
This
was a
the Bad
person.
Puppies event, for those of you who are not
That's right.
WorldCon
What
historians. You probably
yeah.
heard about it anyway because it made national and international news.
It did, and I was interviewed myself for several of these, and I had in one of my other hats, not as chair of the meeting, but as part of the group that keeps track of the Hugo Awards website. There were a lot of controversies about what were perceived as bad actors. A whole lot of people bought memberships all at once, people who probably had no regular interaction with the World Science Fiction Society. They bought memberships, and they essentially all voted about the same way. And a lot of works that most people contended were not of the best quality all were on the ballot. But what happened and I will say there is
in the voting process, which is important to remember.
What's that?
It's the nomination process.
The nomination process, which was different in these days.
Yeah.
And during the period of time between the fact that when the final ballot came out and the convention itself, I rather than naming names, I'm going to say there is a person who is known in the field, and who I don't have disrespect for in any way, who basically said to me, "Look, I'm not an expert in these rules. You are. Where are the secret SMOF rules for just disqualifying these works?" And I said, "There are none." And they just couldn't believe it. They said, "There's got to be something." I said, "No, there's not. We assume that our members are going to police themselves."
There is I don't know if belief is the right word, but there is a sense that the Hugos do need revision, and there's actually been a committee formed. They've been working now for 3 or 4 years to submit new amendments to the WSFS Constitution regarding the Hugo Awards and changing some of the awards that are given out. And I'm hoping that this year they're actually going to submit 1 or 2 changes. I know they've been working really hard this year. They've set up a Discord, and I believe they're in the process of completing their reports now. I haven't followed it too closely. I haven't wanted to be involved with it. I will be involved with it when it comes time to submit the proposals.
Before I get back to the point, I want to address that one comment that just came up on the chat that said, "I've heard vaguely about the sad puppies, but never any of the details." It is a very long story for which we have not enough time. But I will say this: I would suggest go ahead and search for the word debarkle, DEBARKLE, I think, debarkle. That is a very long written story about the whole thing. Debarkle, the Hugo Awards and the Culture Wars. There are suggestions that what we went through in 2015 was an early sign of the incivility that led to other things in American society, at least, and perhaps in other Western democracies as well. So there's So go look for Debarkle, and it's I find it very interesting myself, and not just because my name gets mentioned a couple of times, only in passing, really, even though I chaired that meeting.
It is
Okay, but
it is actually fascinating to look at Spanish history as a precursor of a lot of things that have gone on in our society. If you look at the Great Green Boondoggle of 1964, this precedes the cancel culture debates
By many years.
current, huh?
By many years.
By many
That's
years.
right.
And fandom did it first and did it badly.
It's
This
true.
is sort of a general theme. You go back to Claude Degler and similar things in the 40s, and you get the same thing of fandom dealing with things that are happening now on the internet over fanzines slowly and badly.
So getting back to the people up in arms, the active members of the World Science Fiction Society, the people who do come to Worldcons, the ones who do participate in processes, who don't necessarily go to the business meeting, but they know it exists, that they know that a lot of them wanted change, and they wanted it right this second, retroactively.
And it doesn't work that way.
And I got to tell them, no. And they didn't like that. I said, no, we need emergency action immediately. And I said, no. If you want things changed, you have to get this year's meeting in Spokane to agree to it. And then you're going to have to wait one more year and convince the people next year that they want to vote for it as well. And then the following year it'll take effect. But that'll take too long. And I said, constitutions are not supposed to be easy to change. And there's a really a very important point with the World Science Fiction Society. We have no central command. There is no board of directors. Every Worldcon is a completely independent body. It would be, if a single year's convention could change all the rules right away, it would be way too easy. Just get together.
It would be dangerous.
It would be dangerous, basically. If you had a large enough group of people, you could just basically walk in, take over the meeting and say, we're in charge now. The rules say that our group runs it forever, and the heck with the rest of you. No is the answer. So to protect ourselves from that, we've made the assumption that running that many people into the meeting, or packing the meeting, if you like, 2 years in a row, at 2 different Worldcons in 2 disparate areas, even in 2 different places in the same country, like 2 places in the United States, okay? It's too hard, particularly because in between those 2 years, all of the people who thought the attempt to take over the society rules were bad, they'll have time to organize. And while you might be able to get a couple hundred people to march in once, I don't think you could outvote the entire rest of the society. And that's one where we probably would need the main room because of the contention. Now, that means it's hard. You have to build consensus in the sense of you're going to have to get people convinced that it's not a bad idea, or at least it's not bad enough to come and organize people to vote it down in year 2. And that happens. We've had a number of things that were passed 1 year. The last one I remember that got a large reaction was a motion to remove the semi-prozine Hugo on the grounds that there really wasn't a lot of interest in it. And the following year, a whole lot of members who'd attended Worldcons regularly but did not come to business meetings, they showed up and they debated and they voted it down. It didn't get ratified.
I've been going to Worldcon, God help me, for blankety blank years. And
more than me.
And I probably less than you, Tom. I started
68.
in 71.
68.
Okay, yeah. So,
and 1984 for me. So,
but I went to the business meeting and enjoyed myself. I wasn't part of the team. I was just going as an attendee, and I saw it kind of as theater of the absurd, in the sense that here was a business meeting that took itself very seriously, but they are arguing over really in the long run, unimportant things. I mean, the big arguments were, do we create a four-year rotation over a 3-year rotation? The Worldcons in those days, had a rotation system of east, west, and west.
And Wimpy.
And, pardon?
East, west.
No.
Sorry,
Yes,
that's
east,
an old Wistful joke.
Midwest, east, Midwest.
east, central, west. Yes, okay.
And now we've had some foreign world cons that are saying, well, maybe we should add a European, a foreign rotation so that a foreign country could have the Worldcon once every 4 years, and very, very serious debate. But I just found myself kind of laughing over it, just like make a stupid decision one way or the other, and it was frustrating, but I enjoyed it. And I would go back and there are years when we've had, really serious, for Worldcon, really serious debates. And sometimes we've had really not so serious debates. And the world has become more serious, so we have to take ourselves more seriously. Before, we could be a fanish organization and not have to worry too much about the legalities of certain things, but now we have to. We're known, we're a presence in the world, and we have to take ourselves more seriously.
In a sense, we've become successful. Okay.
Yeah.
As we
When I get contacted to give official interviews about the Hugo Awards from media outlets, I know we're doing something right, but also it's a little scary.
Yeah, and as we get larger, we need parliamentary procedure more.
Exactly.
Yeah, a group of 5 people can probably figure out how to do something, but a group of 50 or 100 or 500 have a lot harder time doing that.
Yeah, and remember that the number of connections goes up exponentially. That's right. Larger, it goes up factorially, which is larger than exponentially. The number of people that have to talk to each other gets huge immediately.
And this is one of the reasons why I have been a little leery of, although I am glad that I have been at the forefront of things to allow people who've been curious about this mysterious thing called the business meeting that sort of happened at a Worldcon, and then several months later you would actually find out what the decisions were because it took that long for the minutes to come out. That I was at the forefront of getting the meetings recorded, so if you wanted to find out what it was like, you could see it yourself. A lot of people saw that, and first, some of them said, "Oh man, I'd rather stick a fork in my eye than be involved in that." Mm-hmm. And others have said, "Now wait a minute, that's not quite as difficult as it sounds, is it?"
And then last year we live streamed it. It was from Discon. It was live streamed, and there were quite a number of people watching it, and the way the camera was set up, I'm not sure if sometimes the closed captioning was in the frame and wasn't in the frame, and
auto captioning being a challenge. Oh no, were they getting the cart operator? So that wasn't so bad either.
Lisa was capturing the cart operator, but there were times when she would move the camera, and it would be on the head table, or it would be on somebody speaking and lose the closed captioning, and there were complaints about that, unfortunately.
You can't please everybody. But what happened there is you've got people say, well, it means anybody who get online, they should all have the right to participate in the business meeting. And while I'm not unsympathetic to that, I'm unclear on how practical it would be. It's the same way that I have contemplated having to chair a meeting with 1,000 members in it. 400 was tough. 1,000 would get more difficult. People who think that I'm a stickler for the rules would have no idea how firm I would have had to be with 1,000. Mm-hmm. The exponentiality that you talk about, Tom, it would be very difficult.
Not to mention, it would be very hard to call on people remotely because
that's part of the management.
You're not seeing the remote broadcast. You're at the head table and you're looking at the people in the room, and it would be really hard to call on people.
And in fact, there is a serious argument to claim that the people who would be attending virtually would be acting as proxies, and we have a rule against people having proxies there. If people are present in the room, then it's definitely not a proxy. If they're not present in the room, it's a question as to whether it counts as a proxy or not, and the meeting would have to have debate and vote on that, I would think.
And that's probably, 2-3 years down the road, that may actually become more of a real issue. But then again, if COVID actually goes away and we can get things back to the way they were,
Or
although
something.
people like remote the immediacy of it, so we might still have to keep it.
I know. And I recognize that even for the people attending the convention, carving out enough time to attend the society's business meeting is challenging. We're asking for 3 hours on at least 3 and sometimes 4 days of the convention, happening, generally speaking, from around 10 in the morning till 1 in the afternoon. That's a bunch of prime time of the convention. There are people who've worked very hard to work on the convention as a volunteer, have programming things they want to see, dealers tables they have to cover, all of these things. I recognize this. There is no good answer. I had one person who I consider a friend of mine. They said, well, why can't I just send a proxy with my husband here? And I said, okay, if I have to allow that, then we have to allow that for everybody. And they said, well, that'd be okay, sure. And I said, what's to stop somebody coming in with a stack of 1,000 sheets of paper, said, here are 1,000 proxies, do whatever I say? Oh, well, we just wouldn't allow that. And I said, no, you can't.
Where do you draw the line? Yeah.
It won't work. Okay, if I allow one, then if in your situation, now your husband counts as 2 votes. Now, first of all, it now slows down every vote because we have to count the proxies. And secondly, let us say we said, well, nobody can have more than 5 proxies. What that ends up saying is that if you want to be treated as an equal member, you got to get 5 proxies. A lot of people don't think it all the way through. They think about, well, what is it for me? And it would be small. Just do it for me, but not for anybody else. Can't do it. If I got to do it for you, I got to do it for everybody.
This is the concept of privilege or private law. And we aim not to enshrine privilege.
Well, some people think that what WSFS handles is completely privileged, because if you're not a member of WorldCon, you have no say in the matter at all, and if you can't attend the business meeting, you have no say either. But the answer to that is that you have a choice. You can join the convention, you can attend the meeting, and we're not excluding anyone. Somebody brought in virtual memberships.
I think we just addressed this. I mean, it's the same problem.
WorldCon this year is having virtual memberships. You can watch. We will live stream the business meeting. The problem is that participation is limited to those actually in the room.
That's right.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. Now, there is a science fictional element to the way we run the business meeting. There is a specific, and I think it won a Hugo Award. Didn't the Moon as a Harsh Mistress win a Hugo?
Yes, it's 4 Hugo winners.
So there's a Hugo Award-winning novel that has a body that is, in some respects, that portrays a body so much like the business meeting that I sometimes wondered if Robert Heinlein actually attended a WSFS business meeting.
He may well have. He was a
fan.
Exactly. Back when the convention was 200 people, 300, 400 people, and had one track of programming, more people, a larger proportion of the attendees attended the business meeting. But I digress. The body I'm talking about,
WorldCon happens starting in 71 or so.
Exactly. The Ad Hoc Congress of Free Luna in the Moon of Harsh Mistress, the initial legislature of the breakaway loonies, was anybody who wanted to attend could attend and debate and talk and vote. And it was the Congress of Free Luna that issued the Declaration of Independence of Luna. Now, later on, they actually adopted a legislature and did all these things. But yeah, at the beginning, it was just exactly what we do. Anybody who's there, okay? And there are challenges when you do that, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But
just be warned, if you go back and read The Moon is a Harsh Mistress, it is a very dated book. Not in terms of the legislature, but in terms of the technology and everything else. It is just a very dated book.
But it's true of many things from the 60s, and it's from the 60s.
But that was one of my all-time favorite books, and then I went back and reread it and was sorry.
So what I have found chairing meetings as small as one in Japan, where we were right on the verge of not having the 12 members necessary for a quorum being the minimum number of members who have to be present for business to be considered legal. That's the smallest. That could be treated fairly casually. In Spokane, with about 300 to 400 people in the room, I was being pretty tight. And then in between, I sort of turned the formality gauge up and down, depending on how the people in the room behave. And I've found that the chair of the meeting can set the tone very much so. If you treat it seriously and with the right decorum, then the members will follow from that. And I actually discovered that there was one year, it was LA, where I thought we only had a few bits of business that were mostly pro forma that for the final day. And so I sort of backed off a little bit and so on. And the meeting ran away from me, and I'm very embarrassed by how badly it ran away from me. I could not manage it very well.
Do we want to talk about Con Zealand and what we had to, the hoops we had to jump through for that?
We can. There are times when requiring the members to be physically present causes a great deal of trouble, and the Worldcon in New Zealand is one of those. As I hope most of the people watching this are aware, because of the pandemic, nobody could come to New Zealand. The only people who could attend the Worldcon in New Zealand were the people who were already in New Zealand. The convention was made all but virtual. And I say all but because the business meeting has rules that are written into the society's constitution. So we worked out a way to make it happen. There were a group of New Zealanders in Wellington where the convention was. They went to the meeting room. I don't know if it might have been the reading room where we would have held the meeting anyway. And they held an online meeting. And by prior arrangement, the meeting voted to basically reject everything up for ratification and then immediately repass it. That is to say, all that did was reset the ratification clock. And it did a number of other things, except for a couple of things that were time were of the essence, but were not controversial, and they passed those. They basically kicked all the parliamentary cans down the road 1 year. That worked. It was not ideal, but it did work.
Nothing was ideal that year.
No, nothing at all was ideal. I'm not sure anything will ever be ideal again. But everything we do is essentially a bunch of compromises on trying to balance rights. And I am sympathetic to the fact that the people who aren't physically at the meeting have essentially little or no voice in the matter of what we change our rules are. I personally proposed a way to give the membership as a whole a voice. Instead of having us vote in person 2 years in a row to change the Constitution, I would have replaced it with a system where the members of 1 year at the meeting could pass a change. And then that change would be submitted to the whole membership of the following year's Worldcon, who would vote on it by ballot, probably around the time of the final ballot of the Hugo Awards, yes or no to ratify. That was rejected. The business meeting voted not. They actually gave it, this interesting thing, they gave it first passage in 2014. And then in 2015, the business meeting at that big meeting, they voted to reject it. The business meeting was not going to vote, did not vote themselves out of business for the second part of the process.
Yeah.
There's a new proposal that's coming up for ratification this year, separating WSFS rights from attending rights. And I have very mixed feelings about that one. But that one says that's more about purchasing your membership, that when you purchase your membership, you are paying a separate fee for your WSFS rights, and those cannot be transferred, but the membership rights can be. The fact that you're a member of the convention can be transferred.
The attendance right is what's transferable.
Right.
The membership right is not, and you have to be a member in order to attend. I believe the way the proposal is written, I understand what it's saying, but I believe it's unclear to a lot of people. They don't realize when they say, "Oh, well, you cannot sell your membership in the organization, but you can sell the right to attend." Well, if I sell my attendance right to you, Linda, and you show up without having bought a WSFS membership itself, just the attendance rights, you'll be turned away.
From the business meeting.
No, you'll be turned away from the convention. You cannot attend. You have to buy a WSFS membership to go with those attendance rights. All it is it's a ticket, but it requires a membership in the organization to also attend it.
This is a long debate, and those of us who have been involved in WorldCons for a while, many of us are very fond of the fact that people who attend the convention are members rather than
Attendees.
Yeah. Or bought a ticket, or any of a number of other ways of saying something that looks the same for most purposes to most people. But we declare that we are part of this organization because we believe in science fiction and fantasy as something that we think is important.
And once upon a time, when you bought your membership, you would actually receive a card.
Yes.
I have somewhere in my collection, I have at least one postcard that says you are a member of the convention with WSFS rights.
I have several wallet cards that claim that I'm a member.
Yeah, and that is the current proposals up before us is attempt to make it more clear that's what it is. Right now, that's effectively what we have. We have what's called a supporting membership. The supporting membership, that's your membership in the World Science Fiction Society. And the difference in cost between a supporting and an attending membership, that's the attending supplement. That's what you have to pay extra to actually attend the convention.
And that money goes to pay for the convention center, for all the mailings, a lot.
I believe the proposal is to separate the two so that if you bought your WSFS rights, you can vote in the UGOs, and those are not transferable. So what you can transfer is your attending rights to the convention, but not your WSFS rights.
Well, if that's what it is, then it's written wrong, because the way its proposers had it is that you could transfer the attendance rights, but if you actually want to attend, you have to also buy the membership that goes with it. Let me give an analogy that may make this more clear. My late father-in-law was a veterinarian, and that meant that he was a member of the American Veterinary Medical Association, AVMA. And that was, he paid his annual membership dues to AVMA, and that made him a member. Now, AVMA holds an annual conference. In order to attend that conference, he had to be a member of AVMA, but he also had to pay the convention fee. Now, if he decided he wasn't going to go, and he gave or sold or whatever, or transferred that to some other person, he gave it to me, for example. For some reason, I wanted to see what the veterinarians wanted. I couldn't get in. I have the ticket, but I don't have the membership.
Right, because you'd have to, if you sell your attending portion of your membership, that person then has to buy a separate WSFS right to attend.
And that is what the intention of the proposed rule is. And that's okay with me. It's saying that once you have joined the World Science Fiction Society as a member for that year, you can't sell it. You can't sell your membership in WSFS. You can sell the right to attend the convention, but that right is not worth anything unless it also has a membership attached to it.
But I think that's if that gets passed, I think that's going to backfire on the Worldcon.
It's kind of like Losfus in that death will not release you even if you die.
Yeah. We're running out of time, and we've just touched the surface of a lot of these things, I suspect. So.
That's all we would have had time for in an hour. And I think we've actually said some things that might help people understand why we use Roberts, what it's good for, what it isn't good for. You don't need it for a group of a dozen people, but you need it for a group of 100. And in fact, I think an analogy I've used is that a convention committee, for example, may not need it, but a committee set up to get a specific job done. Whoever is chairing that committee, they're analogous to the captain of a sporting event team, the captain of the team. Okay, the quarterback of a football team or something like that.
the team captain. The chair of that committee is there to work with that group to accomplish a specific goal. Whereas a deliberative assembly to debate the rules under which we're going to operate, the chair of that meeting is more like a referee with multiple contending sides, and there will be a decision of some sort made by it, but it will not necessarily be one that is a committee consensus type decision.
That sounds like a very good summary, Kevin. Linda, do you have a summary you want people to go away with?
I just think that if they're interested in a deliberative assembly, that they should attend a WSFS meeting and get their feet wet. We try to assist people. We try to explain the rules to them, and it's a good learning experience and could help people later in life. I mean, I've chaired my condo's board and gained the confidence to do that by being on the head table for the business meeting.
And I've chaired.
Not that we use Robert's Rules of Order, but it was a good learning experience.
Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah. It teaches us a lot about listening to others, and the fact that people who disagree can talk and get together and disagree vehemently and then go out and share a meal. And that we actually learn to respect each other and respect each other's opinions is a really important thing to get out of fandom and to get out of any voluntary association that we have.
True.
You know,
Very true.
and with that philosophy, I'll turn it back over to Bob, who will talk a little bit about B-Cubed Press. And if you're interested in going to ChiCon, look up CHICON on your browser search function, and you'll find the WorldCon website. And if you're interested in the history, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the Fancyclopedia. If you just Google Fancyclopedia, you can find yourself falling down the rabbit hole of fan history.
Speaking of rabbit holes, yeah, I will tell you, there's 4 levels of interpretation of the Torah. I got to believe that Robert's Rules of Order is, you guys have just barely scratched it. Yeah. And I would also add, having been a member of multiple government boards with the 5-member boards, knowing Robert's Rules of Order in that scenario is extremely useful, because most of them have the rules written in that they will operate by Robert's Rules of Order, and you get a power-hungry parliamentarian that does not really understand the Robert's Rules of Order, you're in for some really long meetings.
I do want to add on that. I ran for the local fire board in the district where I live. I did not win, but I attended their meetings quite a bit. And one of my great frustrations with such small 5-member groups and so on is that they have a totally misunderstood. None of them actually understand Robert's Rules. They have what I call sandlot rules, among other things. Requiring motions to be seconded in a 5-member group is stupid. That's saying you got to have 40% of the voting power to just discuss something, which is silly.
Sounds like Congress. Allowing me to shift you guys on, because I do want to make the point that I deeply appreciate it, you guys coming on board, because WorldCon, ChiCon coming up. I'm looking forward to. I got my dealer's application in, and I know a lot of people do, so I look forward to seeing you all there. But
if you want to see parliamentary procedure in action, there's a smaller convention called WesterCon 74 that I'm chairing, and we're going to have some contentious issues over the history of future of the society.
In Nevada, right?
It's in Tonopah, Nevada, which is halfway between Reno and Las Vegas.
Let Bob finish his spiel, because we've got less than 2 minutes. Go ahead.
We can run over.
I know, but trying to silence a parliamentarian is kind of like trying to scream against the wind. It's all good. But I did want to say thank you guys, because I do truly enjoy having meetings work and accomplish something. And I look forward to seeing more and more of your guests as your guests I've offered to have most of your guests cycle through this show, so they can either Tom or myself will talk too much with them. But what we have here is we do this every week. I'm Bob Brown. I'm with B Cube Press. And just to let people know what we're doing, we have just finished up today with our final reading on alternative holidays. So, with one or two small exceptions, we're going to be sending out all of our acceptances. Protest diaries, which is becoming more and more relevant as the Roe v. Wade fiasco continues. We're getting that one ready to go out. And next week, we have a very special guest, Sarah Mueller. Sarah Mueller is the author of The Bone Orchard. It is so good to have a writer that you've worked with for years, known for years, attended the convention, done the workshops, sitting there doing all the hard work, and all of a sudden you turn around and it's like, oh wow, you're on the bestseller list. It's a great moment for writers, and it gives hope to us all. So she'll be with us next week, and the week after that, it's the last Sunday of the month. With oh no, it's not the last Sunday of the month this month, so we'll not do that one. I see on the last Sunday of the month, we're very lucky around here. We have Jim Wright and David Gerald will come on and give us their rant of the week, rant of the month. Now I can't call it rant of the month. Now David's going to get on me, but it is so good, so much fun. That said, Tom, Kevin, Linda, say goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you for
Thanks for
coming.
having us.
Thanks.
All righty. You guys
Thank
are good.